More than 300 million people affected by a drought in India, while Californians wonder when they'll be able to water their lawns again. The UN says in the next 10 years, more and more countries will see their resources fall short when it comes to water. So why is water scarcity increasing in the world? And what can be done to stop it? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Sami Zeidan. It's one thing you can't survive without, and yet more and more people around the world are being forced to try. Water scarcity is a growing problem, partly caused by, well, everything from man-made climate change to poor governance to even growth of the world population. And it's affecting more and more people than ever before across all continents. In a time of technological innovation, why is something as basic as access to water still such a huge problem? And even as aid organisations work to resolve it, has climate change progressed so far that water scarcity will inevitably affect ever more people? Lots to discuss, but first Faiz Jamil sets up the story for us from Western India, one of the worst hit regions.
Water is scarce in India's Marathwada region, and what is available to drink is making some here sick. Nirmala Dage is in hospital because of the water she drank from a local well. It was the only water readily available.
For months I was feeling pain and found out when I came to the doctor I had a kidney stone because of the water. After that I started drinking bottled water and felt better, but still had to have the stone removed. It cost me $500.
Kidney stones, along with kidney and urinary tract infections, are all health problems that have been on the rise in this region.
And all these are because of less water. And because of the increasing drought, we are getting more and more patients over the last few years, and it is every year it is peaking higher than the normal.
It's also the water from these types of wells, the sole lifeline for many, that is to blame. Bore wells like this one are getting deeper with each year of drought. Every meter dug means more calcium and salts in the water, which causes health problems. And this current heat wave is making people drink more. At a nearby government hospital, we find Survarna Chapte, who came last week with gastric problems shortly after giving birth.
The only water we've had to drink is from this small bore well in our village. We get sick whenever we drink it.
Local health officials say the increasing use of bore wells is adding to the challenge of delivering health care to this region, and health services were strained even before the past 3 years of drought.
This region is on the periphery of the state, so it's far away from larger and specialty medical centres. The government is trying to bring more services, but it's hard because some places are so far.
Even with better health care, most here have little knowledge of how dangerous the water can be for their health. Not that they have much choice in a region that seems to be as thirsty as they are. Faiz Jamil, Al Jazeera, Maharashtra, India.
Well, as we said earlier, it isn't just an issue in India. Currently, 1.6 billion people live in regions without adequate access to water. That's about 1 in 5 people in the world. The worst of it is in Africa, we're told, where more than 40% of people living in these countries don't have access to clean water. And in California, experts found last year the state had its lowest rainfall in 1,200 years. And we're told it's getting worse. By 2025, water scarcity is expected to touch 1 in 3 people. These countries will have 40% less water than they do now. And these 20 cities scattered across the globe are expected to feel the worst of it. Let's bring our guest into the chat then. We have joining us here in the studio in Doha, Bart Hilhorst, an expert on water resources management. Tim Forsyth joins us from London. He's a professor of environment and development at the London School of Economics and Political Science. And in Amsterdam, we have Robert Rubinstein, chairman and founding partner of TBLI Group, a group involved in sustainable investment to solve social issues. Good to have you with us. If I could start here in the studio with Bart. Has the world's population simply increased beyond what the planet's water resources can sustain? Is that the crux and the basic problem here?
No, I don't think so. At the moment there is water scarcity, but it's not that because we don't have enough water. The reason that we have problems is because we're not using our water in an efficient way.
What about the sort of figures we're hit with that tell us, you know, in the last century the world's population has grown from, it was just under 2 billion to just under 7 billion. That's not as alarming as we take it to be?
No, I don't think so. Drought occurs, or the problems we have with drought is because in many areas of the world we have rainfall and it just runs off without us making use of it. If we can store this water and make more productive use of it, I think we can come a long way in solving, I would say, all drought problems.
Robert, we were talking about this before the show and you were mentioning how the emergence or emerging markets, the number of people moving into the middle class around the world has put a strain on water resources. Tell us more about that.
Well, most of the water is used to irrigate agriculture. 70%, some countries 85% is used to irrigate agriculture. And as people move from no meals to 1 meal to 2 meals to 3 meals, most of that water is going for agriculture. So you have a massive growth of water being transported around the world. In agriculture, farmers are not paying for that water. The only person who's paying for water is when you buy a bottle of water in the supermarket. That's about as close as you'll get to what pricing should be. So politicians are not pricing water. And you have a situation in California where farmers are going crazy, planting avocado trees, almond trees that use tremendous amount of water, and they're not paying the price for the water. And as long as water is not priced properly, you will get a lot of distortions. And yes, there is enough water, but we have the same amount of water as we had 10 million years ago, but we have billions of new mouths to feed. So I agree water management is important, but we also have to get the pricing right. If you do that, investment will follow.
All right, we're going to talk in a minute more, Robert, about the concept of further commercialization of water. But before we get there, I want to ask Tim, when you look at some of the figures, 11 trillion cubic meters of fresh water is available. 95%, we're told, is from groundwater. And currently, we're consuming it at an unsustainable rate. Is there anything that can be done to make the consumption of groundwater sustainable?
Well, I would tend to agree with Bart, your first speaker today, to say that I think there's just too much emphasis given on this idea that there are fixed limits and population and demand is growing in a way which will threaten those fixed limits. I think the crucial issue is not what the limits are, which, by the way, are very difficult to establish and to measure, but instead to work out how to distribute water better. I mean, your second speaker, Robert, talked about the need to price water better. That's important. But at the same time, there's all sorts of histories of how governments allocate water to different regions, which can be very problematic. I mean, in Western India, for example, where we have this terrible drought, the infrastructure at the moment delivers 4 times as much water to the cities as to the rural areas. And that's because of all sorts of reasons, you know, many of which are good. But the reality is that it's very difficult to talk about water demand as though everybody is consuming the same rate. I think the point is that there are lots of different reasons for water being used in different ways by different people, and we need to look at those first.
So basically, Bart, poor governance is perhaps one of the biggest problems in water scarcity, not the growth of the world population.
Well, there are many issues. So as I think, we do have enough rainfall. The idea is to make better use of this. And that's a difficult issue because it's not only water management, but it's also land management. It's changing agricultural practices. It may be changing pricing practices. And bringing all these issues together are difficult. For instance, take the issue of land management. So we have this rainfall. At the moment, it just runs off very often, evaporates very quickly. We, as humanity, we have for a long time, we know the technology to capture this water and to store it. But the thing is, how can you convince...
So what stops that? Is it the lack of political will?
It's the system that doesn't support it. So for instance, if you are a farmer and you don't own the land, or your country has no land tenure system, are you willing to do these hard investments in water conservation, in better agriculture practices, in better soil management, to store the water or to have more infiltration, to make better use of this water? I think you will not do that. So you have to get many things right before you can go into better management of your water.
All right, let's, I believe we have joining us now Nadene Ghouri. She's a journalist who currently works with WaterAid. Let's see if we can bring her into the show, because she's in Morondova, Madagascar. Now, there they have a water shortage issue, but it's more to do with access to water, something similar along the lines of what Bart was telling us about. Give us more details on what the challenge is there, Nadene.
I will. If I could just correct you there, I'm a reporter with The Guardian, and I've spent the past week visiting projects that by WaterAid. So I've been out this week in Madagascar seeing the work that WaterAid do, but I actually write for The Guardian, Sami. So I've been here in Madagascar, which many people think is a paradise island. It's famous for tourism, it's famous for its rainforests, and I'm right now in a coastal region where there's water everywhere. There are tourists here, there are sort of five-star hotels in the region where I am, but you just have to step a couple of kilometers away into the rural villages, and people have no water. There may be one sort of small river, it might be a tidal estuary, so it's salt water, but even if it's fresh water, I visited one village where it was a small amount of sort of brown river water. Now, people were drinking it, they were washing in it, they were defecating in it, they were washing their animals in it. I went to one village of perhaps 50 people, and everybody was sick all the time. Now, in children, you know, that's absolutely catastrophic, because children have to have, if children have several bouts of diarrhea in the first couple of years of their life, that leads to stunting. And Madagascar actually has one of the highest rates in the world of stunting. That basically inhibits children's growth, and it's something that affects them for the rest of their lives, their cognitive development and their physical development. But
Nadene, what is the government doing there to deal with some of the problems you're mentioning, though?
Well, what I've seen here is a really terrible lack of joined-up thinking. So, you've got companies like, you have aid agencies like WaterAid doing great work, and a single water pump can transform a community like I saw. But it's, you have aid agencies doing the best work that they can do. But then the government, the government here in Madagascar have a lot of problems. 70% of the income here in Madagascar is from aid agencies. It's not government income. Right. And so what I'm seeing is that there just isn't any joined-up thinking. There isn't sort of coordination. The aid agencies do their best, but ultimately the government needs to be driving that coordination through, because the aid agencies can only do as much as they can do, but without that sort of government strategy in place, it becomes extremely difficult for them. So what I've seen here is pockets where it's okay, but pockets where it's absolutely devastating. And what I was just saying is, it's not just the kids getting sick. One of the mothers told me that when she gets sick, that means she can't go work in the field for the day. Now that means there's no food on the table. That means she can't pay her children's school fees. So that means her kids can't go to school. So it's got it has an impact, it has a knock-on effect through the entire community. But what I've seen here, and what's so heartbreaking about some of the places that I've visited, is that it's so simple. It's so simple to fix. Just a single water pump can transform an entire community, and the knock-on effects can be massive.
All right, I'm glad you mentioned water pumps there, because we're going to talk in a minute. We do want to shift the conversation into potential solutions, and it's not all bad news, we have to remember, of course. At least 20 countries have managed to improve access to clean water within their borders. Cambodia tops the list. Today, 3 out of 4 Cambodians have access to safe water. That's a 30% improvement in just 15 years, a statistic matched by Mali and Laos as well. So how do they do it? Well, better infrastructure was key. New wells can create access where there were none before, and water purifiers can ensure available water is safe to drink. Aid organisations also stress the importance of education, specifically about good hygiene practices. So a lot of area for improvement. Robert, you've worked trying to convince investors that the commercialisation of water projects can be something that is good for both the environment, for communities, as well as for investors.
Yes, but the financial sector, it's a very predictable group of alpha males. So it's not hard to convince them, but they want to know where things are going. If only last year, 2015, after 30 years, we've made an agreement on carbon, it's taken 30 years to get to that. You know, as long as water is not properly priced, whether you price it that the farmers have to pay for using the water or that you have to use big data for all products that have water intensity that are grown in areas of drought or potential drought, there should be a higher price for that. So as long as the price is not there, it's not going to happen. I think New York City is probably the only example of at large scale proving the value of nature by restoring the watershed, because New York City couldn't put in filters. And Albert Appleton decided, I don't have the billions to put in the filters to clean the water at the level I need. So I worked with the farmers, restored the watershed, and saved billions of dollars. And he kept saying, pricing is the issue. If you don't price it properly, there will be waste. There is enough water, but it's not properly priced. And investors are very happy to invest as long as they know where things are going. And at the moment, there's tremendous waste in water use, and farmers are encouraged to pump out water as quickly as possible because the price of almonds and avocados are high, which are water intensive.
Right.
So that situation is not going to improve things.
Right, Tim, perhaps pricing water can make us a little more careful in how we use it, but is the commercialization, the commoditization approach, I mean, can it solve all the issues of which countries face and populations face when it comes to water scarcity?
No, it can't solve all the issues. No, it can solve some of the issues. I think the key issue here is the question of access. Water scarcity, by definition, is a difficulty of access, but the usual problem is that the people who want to get access but can't are usually those without a lot of political power or bargaining power, and simply introducing a new pricing system isn't going to work for people who can't pay the money in the first place. And probably with not a lot of money either, Tim. Yeah, that's the point. But people who can't pay won't get access. So part of I'll give you an example of one approach to water scarcity. Last year, a development agency called WaterAid produced a film about men in Western India who are dealing with a water scarcity by marrying more women. These women are called water wives, and the beauty of it is that they now have more women who can walk to the wells and get more water for them. Now that is one approach to water scarcity. It solves the men's problem of access, but it doesn't deal with the underlying social structures of inequality. It's certainly a very gendered society where the access to water reflects all sorts of historical problems of gender equality. So simply introducing a new pricing system really won't solve that sort of problem.
All right, I want to give Robert an opportunity to come back in on that. Robert, what do you make of the suggestion that perhaps the pricing system might make the rich and the able a little more efficient, but it might actually price out of the equation the more needy?
Well, it depends on how you do it. I mean, if you do it only with poor farmers who in the past paid nothing for water and now they have to pay a lot of money which they don't have, or you do it at the purchasing side where people who want to buy water-intensive products from places that are water-stressed have to pay like a carbon tax or a water tax, and that tax is used to further develop the water infrastructure there. But somebody's going to have to spend the money. If you have billionaires are hiding all of their money in Panama and other places, you can't expect too much from others. I think that there is a lot that can be done by investing in water infrastructure, but you need to incentivize those to do that. And governments only respond to pain. And the pain at the moment is not big enough, whether it's political pain or economic pain, They are not going to do anything unless the pain is much, much, much larger. It's not there. They're not suffering. The farmers and the villagers are suffering. They could easily put in wells everywhere if it was a top priority, but they're not.
All right, Bart, we've talked about population growth, we've talked about urban planning and government responsibility. What about climate change? How much of the water scarcity issues that we hear about are being being caused or at least exacerbated by what we call climate change?
Well, they will certainly be exacerbated by climate change because the temperatures go up, more water evaporates, we need more water to grow our plants. So climate change is clearly not helping. So
is it a vicious circle? No matter how much more money or how we change the model with dealing with water scarcity, change government intervention and planning, are we ultimately heading towards or inevitably heading towards water scarcity because of the damage that man has already done to the environment?
No, I don't think so. I think what comes out of this discussion is that there are many ways to use the water that we have more efficiently. And I think that's where the solution is. We waste enormous amount of waters. For instance, part of the discussion was about food. Well, food is by far the dominant water user. Just to get an idea about the order of magnitude, a kilo of meat is 10,000 liters of water, while you drink maybe 2 liters a day. And between 30 and 40% of the food is lost from harvest to retail. So I'm not even talking about what you lose in your household. So there's so many potential efficiency gains, and I think that's where we wish. And there's many different solutions. Every context will have a different, more appropriate solution. Right. And we have to look for that.
A lot of room to improve that efficiency
Absolutely.
curve. Tim, will any of the points agreed to in Paris in the latest environment deal make a difference to the climate change process, how it impacts water scarcity and how careful we are with resources and fossil fuels that impacts water?
Well, in general terms, it steps in the right direction, but the climate change agreement in Paris of last December doesn't really deal with water scarcity itself. I mean, there's a lot of discussion in the climate change agreement about reducing emissions of gases, but also in raising money to spend on preparing for climate change, or what scientists call adaptation to climate change.
But
now,
Tim, isn't that supposed to have an impact on extreme weather patterns, which apparently does contribute to water scarcity in some parts of the world getting, too much and other parts of the world getting too little? Or
it's not mentioned explicitly. I mean, certainly, climate change is related to water scarcity in all sorts of ways, but the climate change agreement in Paris doesn't actually mention, policies to do with water scarcity. It's all part of a contribution to various approaches to try and deal with environmental change and to make countries prepare for it better and to think about the causes of human-made environmental change. But in the Paris Agreement, there isn't much explicitly about water, but the stuff in climate should eventually lead indirectly to lots of actions about water, such as using water more efficiently. There's also this issue of reforestation, which will also have impacts upon water, sometimes negatively, of course. So the whole things are all wrapped up together, but it's not really an explicit contribution to the problem of water scarcity.
All right, I think we've got a minute, so I want to give it to Robert. Can commercialization, commoditization of this issue help with another aspect of water scarcity? That's fighting the pollution, water treatment. I was speaking to an expert earlier who said we're not treating as much water as we could do, and that could make a big difference to the availability of water.
If governments or the water boards are not investing in infrastructure, it will decay. And you will have situations like big urban environments like Manila losing, 40, 50, 60% of their water because they weren't investing in infrastructure. And, that's a question of allocating resources. Bart was mentioning 10,000 liters of water to make one hamburger or a kilo of meat to make a hamburger at McDonald's because it's cheap. As long as it's cheap, people will buy it and you'll use more water to grow more cattle. And that has to change. That has to change.
Sounds like
this is a dead end, this approach of just everything.
It sounds like we need to rethink a lot of systems in the world right now, but we're going to have to leave it there. I'm sure we'll have more time to come back to this one. Let's thank our guests so much for their contributions: Bart Hilhorst, Tim Forsyth and Robert Rubinstein. And thank you too for watching. You can see the show again anytime by visiting our website aljazeera.com, and for further discussion head over to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter, our handle @AJ Inside Story. From me, Sami, Zeidan, and on behalf of the whole team here, for now, it's goodbye.